October 22nd, 2020, 12 days until November 3rd, 12 days until President Trump is reelected. Hunter Biden's laptop is exposing Biden and the Democrats for the frauds they are. The third presidential debate is tonight in Tennessee. It'll be interesting to see if Sleepy Joe attends, after hiding in his basement for the last 4 days. Hashtag Trump is the best. Democrat henchmen have proven that Donald Trump is the most honest and incorruptible president ever. Fake news lies cannot dirty up squeaky clean Donald. Hashtag Obamagate. Obama is still the most corrupt president in history. He's a divider of the nation along race, gender, or any physical attribute or situation. Fancy Nancy Pelosi is the 52nd Speaker of the House. She has been married to the same man since 1963, giving her plausible deniability, like Joe Biden, claiming they have no connection to family business dealings. She and her husband Paul have 5 kids, have a net worth of up to $200 million. Crazy Nervous Nancy has tics, multiple plastic surgeries, BOTOX, dentures, wears expensive scarves and outfits that make her look like Magda from Something About Mary. She is quite the character. How is she taken seriously? She faces no real inquiry from the Democrat mainstream media. Is she a drinker and or a pill popper? She started her political career with great hope to make a difference. She could have been one of the great American heroes in politics, but she quickly sold out to become a ruthless, power-mad, pompous, self-unaware fool. Every day she shows she hates America and loves only her power and wealth. When the first CCP virus stimulus was being negotiated because of the mandatory government shutdown, it frightened everyone to hide inside and shutter their businesses for the good of the nation. It was Nancy who stole millions for the Kennedy Center in New York, even though they admitted they didn't need it. She went home and refused to cooperate, hiding out, and then came back with her more than 1,400-page unseen legislation the day before they were supposed to vote on it, after not participating at all with the Republicans, who were working tirelessly to get the much-needed money into the hands of struggling Americans. Pelosi doesn't care. All she wants is more power and more money for her constituents and pet projects. Her legislation initially included millions for Planned Parenthood, mandatory mail-in voting to steal the election from Donald Trump, $50 billion for the failing post office, which could never have used all that money to help during the virus shutdown. It included funds for a bailout of blue, failed state pension funds and mismanagement. A host of overpriced giveaways to buy votes and reward her contributors. So common with her, bribing to get contributions with taxpayer funds. Also in her wish list was a mandate that diversity on corporate boards and in banks. A line that required airlines to disclose and reduce emissions. Mandated that states allow voting by mail, as we had mentioned. Increased union bargaining power. Expanded tax credits for wind and solar power. It prohibited universities from disclosing the citizenship status of their students. It provided bailout for private pensions, including those union pensions. A federal takeover of state elections. Reinstatement of the state and local tax deductions for Democrat mismanaged states. That's the SALT tax that you hear Cuomo and the rest of the blue state governors whining about. What do any of these things have to do with helping the needy Americans? Made needy by no fault of their own. It also included student loan forgiveness, a jubilee, meaning wiping out all of the debt for the students. No consideration for the people that paid their way through college. As mentioned before, the most notable and criminal part of it was the $25 million for the favored elite Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. It bailed out that place that didn't need a bailout, and straight after they received the funds, they admitted that they were laying off people anyhow and would not return those funds. One of her most despicable earlier efforts was an attempt to steer money to Planned Parenthood. Why do the Democrats love abortion? It appears that they want to make abortion mandatory. The latest holdup in the new negotiations for another stimulus package is largely centered on Pelosi trying to include a massive bailout for the states deep in debt. Again, those Democrat-led states. Her main concern is for those blue state underfunded public sector union pensions. That is her voter base. She came out with an announcement establishing a unilateral 48-hour deadline to complete talks on a new round of federal coronavirus relief. This time, even though the federal additional unemployment benefits ceased months ago, leaving those unemployed starving and frightened. She said her focus is on the legal language of the House's version of the bill and that of the White House negotiators, Mnuchin in particular, which is another outright lie. Even her own Democrat House members say she should accept President Trump's generous $1.8 trillion should never even be close, and yet she is holding out for even more. Power mad, power hungry. A little history of Nancy Pelosi is in order. She started off as the chair of the Democratic Party. She was in office from 1981 to 1983 in California. She was born Nancy Patricia D'Alessandro. She was born in 1940 in Baltimore, Maryland. She has 5 children, including leftist loudmouth, nepotism benefactor Christine and grifter Paul. She earned a reputation as a highly effective fundraiser. She rose through the ranks, serving on the DNC and as a chair of both the California Democratic Party and the host committee for the 1984 Democrat National Convention in San Francisco. She sucked up to Representative Phil Burton and his wife Sala. He died in 1983 and was succeeded in his seat by his wife Sala, who shortly before her own death, only 4 years later in 1987, tapped Pelosi to take a run for her seat. She narrowly won that special election and was reelected in 1988 to a full term. Up until the Trump era, she has kept a low profile with the help of the fake news media. She learned well from her political boss father, who trained her to keep her greed in check. In Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it reminds us that trading on insider information, steering legislation to help members of Congress's investments, and getting their family members employed, often as ghost payrollers, by those seeking favors from them. Congressional ethics standards are written and enforced by congressional leaders themselves, which means they have no standards. Nervous Nancy has the reputation as a suave political chess master, when in reality, she is just a brazen woman, a minority bucking the system, who scared the establishment into letting her be relevant. They underestimated her, and now she wields power ruthlessly. She has the backing of the media elite, enabling her criminality and ineptness to go unreported. It stays hidden. Watch any video of her, and you see an unhinged woman with anger and psychological issues. Some newbie reporter brave enough to expose her could make a real change for our society and at the same time boost their career by doing what a journalist is supposed to do. Pelosi's father, Thomas Big Tommy D'Alessandro Jr., taught her well in the world of getting rich in public service. Big Tommy was a close associate of the notorious mobster Benjamin Benny Trotta Magliano, as well as several other criminals, all the while serving 5 terms as the Democrat congressman from Maryland and 3 terms as the mayor of Baltimore. D'Alessandro was forced to exit the 1954 governor's race in Maryland after it was revealed he had received undisclosed money from a convicted mobster who was convicted of fraud and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Big Tommy, Daddy D'Alessandro, was closely associated with another Maryland political kingpin, Jack Pollock, a bootlegger and street enforcer who was arrested multiple times for payoffs, bribery, corruption, and murder. At the height of Pollock's power, he raised the dead to vote, lined voters' pockets with walking around money, and held sway over Maryland's legislature. The New York Times noted that Pollock would stand in the hallways of Annapolis, literally controlling the General Assembly through his hand-picked henchmen. The same formula is employed by the aging daughter by pushing mail-in voting, intimidation, and lawfare. Pelosi's papa also hung out with the Baltimore crew, a faction of New York's Gambino crime family. This family was associated with murders, theft, gang rapes, and many other sickening crimes. Pelosi continues to be a radical leftist and continues to vote for gun control and abortion, opposes welfare reform, and consistently uses hyperbolic language against her political adversaries. Her criticisms of President George W. Bush could be harsh. She once characterized him as an incompetent leader and Hitler. It is not just about Donald Trump. She has lied and used her position of power to slander every Republican president and candidate. Don't forget how brutal she was to Mittens Romney. As the Speaker of the House, she legitimately makes $223,000 per year. She has many perks like the private Air Force jet to take her home whenever she wants, sometimes multiple times a week. Since Nancy and her husband Paul have been married since their early 20s, their careers have benefited each other's and made them true power couple. She gets him insider deals, making them both extremely wealthy, and his business connections get her huge campaign donations, which keep her in the Speaker of the House chair. Without him, she wouldn't have a clean and direct funnel to all the personal wealth or power. It could be anyone. We are only pointing out their team effect, which keeps them loyal to their scheme's secrecy. If they went through a divorce, just imagine what information would come out. Everyone with a brain can see what is going on, but they do have plausible deniability. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Look at what we are accusing Orange Man Bad of doing. Here is one example of her legislation which benefits her personal wealth using our taxpayer funds. The 3rd Street Light Rail expansion in San Francisco. Pelosi has been the expansion's champion at the federal level. Since 2003, she has secured well over $1 billion for the project in the form of earmarks, federal funding agreements, and stimulus disbursements. This benefited Salesforce and megadonor CEO Mark Benioff. According to her most recent personal finance disclosures, Paul Pelosi owns a stake in Salesforce worth between $500,000 and $1 million. The Pelosi's first invested in Salesforce in 2000 when they purchased between $15,000 and $50,000 in stock. According to Financial News, Pelosi seems to have acquired shares in a private offering prior to the company's 2004 initial public offering, an IPO, which was not available to the rest of us. Salesforce debuted at $3.75. As of today, it is trading near $260. If she bought only $50,000 pre-IPO, her holdings would be worth more than $3.3 million today. She has publicly acknowledged at least 8 other pre-IPO investments, with the Visa investment, the Visa credit card investment, screaming out for attention because she sat on the congressional committee and softened and thwarted credit card reform for 2 years. She profited handsomely. The credit card companies profited exponentially, and the consumers, all of us, suffered at her duplicity. She is indignant in typical arrogant, crazy Nancy fashion. She said she did nothing inappropriate, with a BOTOXed straight face, so it was hard to get a reading on her sincerity. Another shining example, husband Paul owns 8.1% of EDI Associates, which got a CARES Act loan/grant of between $350,000 and $1 million. That company invests in El Dorado Hotel in Sonoma, California. Pelosi's stake is worth between $250,000 and $500,000. Most likely, this loan will be a gift from the taxpayers and will not be repaid. Pelosi, Biden, and the rest of the establishment officials are supposed to avoid anything that can have the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest, according to the government's ethical standards. Yet, when President Trump gets accused of doing something they don't like, albeit legal, but against the left's socialist agenda, then even the appearance of a conflict of interest, unfounded as it is, will be enough to illegally impeach the president. The Stalinist benefits roll down to the children of power, as we know from the Biden scandals, and it is a trend in Democrat families. Shortly after his mother Nancy Pelosi became the first woman speaker, her son Paul Pelosi Jr. was hired by a company called Info USA. He was paid $180,000 a year as its vice president, a job he was unqualified for. Even though his job with Info USA was considered full-time, he miraculously continued another full-time job as a home loan officer at Countrywide Home Loans in a suburb of San Francisco. The owner of Info USA, Vinod Gupta, is a huge Clinton and Democrat supporter. Info USA paid Bill Clinton more than $2 million for consulting services and spent almost $900,000 to fly him around the world and to fly Mrs. Clinton to campaign events. Paul Jr. was also put on the board of a Ukrainian oil company, Viskoil/NRG Lab, and traveled there in 2017. What is it with the Democrats and Ukraine? Joe Biden is out, but Pelosi is still in power. So Junior Paul Pelosi gets his beak wet with free money simply because of his powerful mommy. Amazing coincidences come out of Washington's most powerful families. Time to take their unfettered power away. Do not forget to vote. Ironic that all these Democrat carbon energy haters get their unqualified spawn jobs at oil and gas companies in other countries, countries that receive billions of dollars from the USA. Interesting that those people that get their spawn jobs control the purse strings to those other countries. Finally, about Paul Jr. He was an advisor for a marijuana company, Verda Science, back in 2014. It was not legalized for recreational use in California until 2016 with Pelosi's help. Paul was hired by Cambridge House International clearly because of his last name. Just like Hunter Biden, it was all for the connections. In a trade show interview, Paul Jr. stumbled through the clearly scripted interview, reading directly from his note cards, and wearing what looked like an oversized dad's suit. We can only hope that Paul Pelosi Jr. will expose the Pelosi crimes, just like Hunter Biden did, to the Biden crime family. Joe Biden clearly did not have a mentor like Big Tommy D'Alessandro to teach him to stay small and steal big. Biden's ego, greed, and media cooperation made him sloppy in the end, and combined with his drug addict son's impetuousness, it turns out to be his demise. How is it possible he is the nominee for the President of the United States in the Democrat Party, let alone still on the ticket today, since all the evidence is public about his corruption and selling out our country for what turns out to be a few shekels? Nancy Pelosi has been untouchable for so long now, she has lost touch with reality and her scheme. She is so far removed from the rest of the country, she makes gaffes, like Joe Biden, going on TV during mass unemployment and the countrywide shutdown, wearing designer outfits costing thousands of dollars, laughing without a care about ice cream in front of dual sub-zero refrigerators, which cost tens of thousands of dollars each. Clueless, sloppy, and unstable, she gets a pass because she has become a caricature of herself, Crazy Nancy. Jim Cramer from CNBC said it to her face on live TV. That is how accepted it is that she is just Crazy Nancy and has to be permitted to ruin the country. She wears the Prada, Chanel, Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, with blown-out hair, with her Botoxed and facelift face, trying to keep her false teeth in her mouth, spinning her political nonsense. She is oh so quick to blame others for her scandals and failed policies. Remember her blaming the salon owner who revealed her breaking the rules that she instituted against the rest of us in San Francisco because she is special and has to get her hair done? Do you remember that? If she wasn't the wife of Paul and Speaker of the House, she would be the dirty-faced bag lady screaming at the buses, sleeping under the underpass. There is a solution to this madness. We need to have complete disclosure of all the federal politicians' tax returns for 5 years prior to holding office and every year in office. We need this because the politicians have so much power and immunity from prosecution that the only remedy is to vote them out of office. We need more. Donald Trump had his tax returns feloniously leaked to the New York Times, showing he did nothing illegal, and now we need to see all of the establishment politicians and lobbyists' sources of income. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, the Clintons, including Chelsea, etc., need to open their kimonos. As the saying goes, I'm not upset about a billionaire becoming a politician. I'm concerned about a politician becoming a millionaire. The politicians have so much power against us citizens through the Patriot Act, the FBI, CIA, and all the other intelligence agencies, and we have no recourse to hold them accountable. Voting isn't enough because they have weaponized government against us with a two-tiered justice system. The media is complicit by hiding their nefariousness and lying about their opponents. If they are clean and have nothing to hide, they know what they are signing up for when they run for office. We hear the argument all the time when they illegally collect all of our personal data, and when they get caught, they insinuate, if you aren't doing anything wrong or illegal, then you have nothing to hide. You shouldn't have a problem with us listening to your conversations and hoovering up all of your data. Well, fair is fair. When a politician runs for office, they shouldn't have a problem with complete disclosure. As always, keep your eyes and ears open, trust your instincts, and do not be afraid to speak up for your rights. Never bend the knee. Jimbo John Galt on Parler, Twitter, iTunes, YouTube, and Rumble. Check us out at jimbojohngalt.com.